Before we start the review, I want to say if you just want like an audio version of this review, go check out the podcast. Did you get the memo? I'll leave a link in the description if you just want an audio version. And with that, let's get started on the review for Returnal. We're finally in the new generation of consoles, and honestly, I'm super excited to see what these companies will come up with as the new hardware for the average gamer has finally come out. I know the PS5 and the Xbox Series X are very difficult. Even till now to get one, but I was still lucky enough to get one. And for the first PS5 exclusive that I was able to play, I chose Returnal because when it was first announced during like the PlayStation their state of play a couple of months ago. I think it was last year. I really was impressed on the concept of Returnal. This idea of you basically dying over and over again. It reminded me a lot of like the movie Edge of Tomorrow, and I kind of like that concept a lot. So when I saw it was like a mixture of that and like some like sci-fi horror, some like thriller stuff, I was super excited to see what they would come up with as the new lineup of PlayStation 5 exclusives is starting to roll out now since we're further in the year. And honestly, I have to say, I'm going to say this now, I really did enjoy the experience for Returnal. If I'm going to say if you have a PS5, go get it now cuz it's definitely worth your time. And in Returnal, we get to play as Celine. She is an astronaut who ends up crash landing on this unknown planet that is secretly tied to her. And if for some reason, every time Celine dies, she always spawns right back to the crash site that she landed at the very beginning of the game. And that's why the game is called Returnal, because you're always returning to the start of every level, every attempt. You always start back, always. And honestly, that's the main mechanic that makes and break this game, honestly, because since you do basically start the level all over again, it's kind of heart wrenching since you basically lose all of your progress in terms of how far you get into the level. But the good thing is that you really don't lose progress in terms of story and your knowledge of weapons, everything. It's just kind of you just start over again, but you still retain every single piece of knowledge and you basically continue the story as is because it's well integrated so that it doesn't feel like you just starting over just because the same said F you and screwed you over all of a sudden. But in this game, it doesn't do that. With every attempt, you get smarter. With every attempt, you learn things here and there that actually make the game a lot easier in some ways because this game is actually pretty challenging, especially towards the very end of the game where things really do ramp up and the enemies get crazy hard and you take a lot more damage than normal. The best thing that I think that this game really did integrate is the level design because every time you die, the level never stays the same. The layout of the map changes, different rooms change here and there. It always feels like a brand new experience every time you die in the levels because everything rearranges. So you're constantly learning, you're constantly adapting to what the game throws at you, and that's what this game does best. They really does help you adapt to your surroundings because sometimes you might memorize like a whole map, but since it's always changing, it's always something new for you to experience. And honestly, I kind of did that sometimes where I'd just kind of die on purpose just to see how the world would change around me. And I'm honestly super impressed on how different the layout changes every single time. It always feels like it's a brand new map every time. Sure, you'll be able to recognize like rooms here and there and every now and again, but most of the time it doesn't stay the same. So that really does add variety and a lot of replayability if you want to see what how the world interacts, how the world changes as you die over and over again. Like even though this game is pretty unforgiving, it does have a lot of leeway here and there though, especially for like the weapons and like items you can use. The only thing that sucks about this whole permadeath thing is that you lose all of your augments, all of your upgrades, and the gun that you were using at the time. You always spawn with the standard pistol, they call it the sidearm in this game. There's actually a bunch of different guns that you can collect, as you're progressing through the story and maneuvering on the maps. The only thing is that you can only carry one weapon, so you have to make sacrifices on what weapon you really want to use. You can choose from a carbine, you can choose from like a shotgun, there's like a thermal grenade launcher, there's like a needler kind of thing from Halo. If you guys know the needler gun from Halo, this is a gun similar to that where it rebounds and it gets faster and faster as the bullets come back into the gun. It was actually pretty cool, but it's kind of hard to use because you have to actually hit something for it to start speeding up, and then you get to the point where it shoots super fast and enemies die super quickly. But in that, other than that, the gun kind of sucks. I feel like in this game, half of the guns kind of suck in terms of like maneuverability and stuff, because with the shotguns you can't really maneuver around and hit your targets that accurately, and with the needler gun that I was saying earlier, it's kind of hard for you to rebound shots if you're constantly moving around all the time. The only guns that I felt like were actually pretty good was the carbine, the sidearm, because it depends on which version of it you get. Because there's a lot of versions of each different gun. There's a version that shoots faster. There's the version that does more damage. There's a version where there you get more ammunition. And there's another version where it overheats less. And also, I feel like there is a ton of variety in the guns, but a lot of them do feel useless, as I said before. I think the only gun that I feel like was super broken was the electro pylon, because it shoots like this little like needle thing, like electricity needle, and then there's a version of it that shoots out a web and it latches onto enemies and it does damage over time, which is absolutely broken because movement is the key to this game. This is a roguelike game, so movement is absolutely crucial. And I've got to say, movement in this game really does feel great. It really does feel smooth. It really does feel responsive. It really does feel like you can go around the map carelessly without really worrying about maybe lagging or maybe you input the wrong button, but you can actually correct your movement in midair with the grapple and stuff like that in your dash, which is absolutely awesome because I know sometimes in roguelike games the movement can be very rough around the edges, but in this game it's actually not. It really does feel very smooth, especially when you're shooting and maneuvering around all the maps. And another thing about the weapons is that you get like this little alt fire, which uses the adaptive triggers for the PlayStation 5. I really do like how they're integrating the new like stuff that the PS5 can do, and then the controllers they have adaptive triggers. And in this game, they use the adaptive triggers to basically the gun acts differently depending on how you use the triggers. If you shoot the fire button faster, it shoots faster. If you do it slower, it does slower. And it if you use the left bumper, which is L2, if you press it halfway, it does the normal aiming down the sight. If you push it down all the way, you get the alt fire, which is like a special ability that the gun can do to help out during combat. And there's a bunch of different like things that the alt fire can do. There's a bunch of different like uh projectiles or ability that it can do. The only thing that sucks is that you only get one per gun. So if you want a different alt fire, you have to change guns or you have to find one. And honestly, I feel like if it was better if we get to choose what kind of alt fire we get, because I feel like sometimes some of the alt fire is actually absolutely like useless. Like the horizontal beam one where it ricochets off walls. It's kind of useful when it's like a one enemy or there's multiple, but the thing is, if you miss, then bullets fly everywhere and you always miss your target. And then you have like the more useful ones, which is like this like the laser beam one, which is absolutely broken too. It does a ton of damage. There's the homing rocket one, which is actually really good. If you get that one, like try to stay alive as long as possible, because while you're moving and use that alt fire mode for the uh homing rockets, you always hit the target most of the time. And then there's another one where you can shoot like a parasite thing out of your gun. It latches onto enemies and it does damage over time. There's like a bunch of different stuff that Celine can do, but you can only choose one at a time. So that kind of takes away a little bit of variety in terms of gameplay. But that's the main thing about this game is that you make a lot of difficult decisions, which is actually pretty good. I really do like how you have to go out of your way to make hard decisions on what gun do you want or what alt fire you want. And another main part of the gameplay that I honestly I hated, but I loved it at the same time because it just adds like an extra layer of difficulty onto already the hard gameplay are the parasites. Parasites are these little creatures that you can find around each biome and each map, where they give you a buff, but they also weaken you in some way. Sometimes it gives you a huge stat boost in integrity, which is your health, but you take fall damage if you fall too far down. In this game, there's no fall damage, but there's a parasite out there that'll make you take fall damage if you fall from too far high. And then there's other ones where your alt fire cooldown goes down by a certain amount, but you take damage when you pick up items. And honestly, that parasite is so freaking annoying because I gotta say, it's really hard to find healing stuff around the map. Like there's like these little like resin things like that you find around the map that are used for healing, but the thing is they're far and few between. So when you get like those augments that you take damage for doing a certain thing, it really does make the game even harder because you have to make the decision on, do I get the health item but get reduced health because I take damage and I pick it up, or do I sacrifice health to get more health for later on? Which in this game you have to manage your health because it's a high risk, high reward situation every single playthrough. But that's the thing about this game though. It rewards exploration. It rewards you if you go out of your way and go off the beaten path. But the thing is, there is a lot of risk when it comes to going off the path that you're supposed to go on. You can possibly find like the little beds that increase your integrity by a lot. Or you can even find the reconstructor, which basically gives you like an extra life, which I definitely recommend looking every single time because it really does help out a lot when you mess up. Like you can potentially find better items, better guns, better stat boosts, better augments, but it all comes out of risk because if you mess up, your run was completely useless and it was a waste of your time. And honestly, this game really did feel like that I wasted my time sometimes because I wanted to go get better stat boosts for the boss fights, but then I end up killing myself in the end. It just fucking sucks when you have to start over because you always start at the beginning again, and it always feels bad when you had a really good run, but then you just messed up, like the slightest mess up that gets you killed. And another thing about this game that it's actually pretty similar to the parasites, it's the malfunctions. The malfunctions are these little things that infect your suit negatively. You get these malfunctions from either finding cursed items like the spoiled resins, or you open a cursed chest. And these are very similar to parasites where you get a negative effect. It changes the gameplay in a certain way. But one thing that the malfunction does that the parasite doesn't is that the malfunctions actually influence how the enemies act and what they can do. Because sometimes if you're doing a boss fight, and honestly, I've died a bunch of times, so you kind of memorize their movements. You know that they do a certain attack here and there, but when you add a malfunction on top of that, they actually do something new. There's something unexpected that you don't really see until you're actually fighting the boss fight, which adds another layer of difficulty. Which honestly, it was still pretty difficult, but it was still like a breath of fresh air, seeing that the game adapts to how you play it. The game adapts on whether if you do the malfunctions, if you get different guns, if you get different parasites, the gameplay is influenced by your decisions. And it's up to you if you want the game to be easier or harder for yourself. Was actually pretty good because then you can replay it a bunch of times. You can make the game harder on purpose after you finish the main story, which honestly I recommend because it's actually a lot of fun and there's like a lot of secrets and stuff that you can find out throughout the story. And I think the story is it was pretty good. But the thing is, it was really, really confusing. It was super, super confusing at times because a lot of the time it doesn't explain things. You kind of have to piece everything together, which I kind of like because this game is very similar to Control. And if you haven't played Control, I definitely recommend it. It's kind of similar to this in terms of like storytelling. And I'll do a review on Control. I don't know when, but I do plan on doing it because I really like that game. And the story, I feel like it did enough for you to understand what was going on. It really did make you ask questions on why Celine is here, and it also uncovers secrets of Celine's past that hints why she may be stuck on this planet for some reason. I won't tell you what exactly, or like the theory that's going around of why Celine is actually there and what the whole point of the game is, because I want you guys to figure that for yourself, because it's actually super interesting on how things slowly get revealed here and there, and everything just kind of comes together at the very end. And like another thing that I really did enjoy about this game is the boss fights. Sure, there's only like 3 or 4 of them, but they're actually pretty fun and they're really difficult to play when you first attempt them, because this is a roguelike game, so there's gonna be projectiles freaking everywhere at all times as you're playing. So in that game, these boss fights, there's so many fucking shit that's flying towards you, and you have to manage how to shoot. You have to manage your movement at the same time, but your movement is super smooth, so it's a lot easier for you to maneuver around all the projectiles in the game. And honestly, the last boss fight was so fucking hard, because like it was easy the first 2 phases, but then all of a sudden it just throws everything at you, and you just constantly dodge and you're constantly trying to aim, but you can't because there's so much shit flying at you that you really have to decide on whether to shoot or just keep dodging the entire time but get killed and then you start all over. Another thing is the enemy type variation is well done here. I really do appreciate the amount of monsters and the amount of creatures that they really created for you to fight. Because sometimes in games there's not a lot of like enemy variety, which makes the game dull. But in this one, there's so many different types of enemies for you to fight. And in each biome, they have their own set of different enemies for you to fight. Sure, they might be similar variations to stuff you already fought, but they do something different every single time. For example, there's like this little lizard creature in the very beginning of the game that only shoots projectiles horizontally, and then as you progress the story, you get another uh, monster similar to that where they shoot in different shapes, or they shoot at faster rates, or they do more damage. And it's the same for every single monster. And then sometimes there's just monsters that are just like their own type, like the sub bosses. And honestly, even the sub bosses are fucking hard in this game. In like the ice biome and like the desert biome of this game, this is an enemy that I call the Marauder, because it feels like you're fighting the Marauder from Doom, where it just absolutely does a ton of damage. It knows exactly where you are at all times. And honestly, it just felt like the Marauder. Like it, some people probably say that that's just like a stupid comparison, but honestly that's what it felt like, because they just tracked you down almost all the time. And honestly, the AI for this game is actually pretty good. Like they track you anywhere. Like sometimes I'd maneuver around an enemy, but they'd go around the other side to catch up to me very quickly, which I thought was very cool, because that makes the gameplay even more unique and made it feel more special. It made it feel more harder, because then you basically have to outsmart your enemies now. You have to basically decide on whether to move a certain way and get predicted, or you become unpredictable but still know what you're doing. And the environments for this game, they're stunning. They're really really beautiful. They really did go all out on the environments on this alien planets that you end up going on. Like, sure, graphically, like in terms of like Celine, she doesn't look the greatest. It still looked pretty good though, but like the environments look super, super good. Like the textures and everything, it really did make you feel alive, and it looked absolutely stunning. Every single biome that you end up going on, and there's like little details here and there. Even on the monsters, you see like the textures on them and stuff like that. And even Celine changes as you go into different biomes. You see that her suit kind of adjusts to the environment. Like in the ice one, you see that some of her suit is like freezing up. In the desert one, you see that some of her suit is turning red because of the sand, the red sand. And then even in like the underwater level, you can see kind of hints of Celine adapting to her environments, which is a nice touch. Like, I really do like it when companies put attention to detail, because it makes stuff feel more alive. It makes it closer to real life, and I really do appreciate that. They don't have to do these kinds of things, but it really is nice to see when they put extra effort in terms of detail. And the amount of augments and like these alien like technology that you integrate to yourself just adds on even more to the experience. You get a grapple which you can just grapple from certain points. I kind of wish that they added it so that you can grapple whenever you want. But I feel like at the same time that kind of would have hindered it a little bit because since you're constantly moving, you can't really pinpoint exactly where you are. So the little orbs do guide you in some way or in another, which is actually pretty fun. It really did feel smooth grappling from point to point. You can't shoot while you're grappling, which honestly that would have been cool and a nice addition for them to add. But even though you can't do that kind of stuff, it was still actually a lot of fun to grapple around. You even get like the little augment thing for you to go underwater, and you even get like this freaking lightsaber thing that one shots most enemies, and it was a lot of fun because this is like kind of like your last resort. Like the melee combat is like super basic. She just slashes in horizontal plane, but even though it's just like a basic thing, it's not meant for the core gameplay. Your core gameplay is shooting and moving around, and the sword is basically just like the simple melee, just in case you can't shoot fast enough or react fast enough and get a really good hit on an enemy before you're able to take them down with your gun. And another saving grace that this game has in terms of like difficulty and making it a little easier is that there's actually stuff that you can craft around the map. There's stuff like fabricators that you can find here and there that you lets you craft like certain items because there's no items. You don't spawn with items. You don't like randomly find stuff. You have to look for replicators or you get super lucky and you find it when an enemy drops it. Because like items are far and few between and are super useful when you actually find one because there's a bunch of types of items that you can use as if you find them because you're not a guarantee of what you get. You can get like items where you can summon like the spike thing out of the ground and kills an enemy. There's another one where if you jump, it shoots like the shockwave kind of thing and it hurts enemies. There's another one where it shoots like a portal opens up and it fires projectiles at enemies. It's basically like your little helper. And then there's even like the Sub-Zero one where it like freezes enemies in a certain radius around you. And then you have your typical health items, and then you have like your augments, like increasing your protection, increasing your integrity, increasing your melee damage, your speed, your strength, all that stuff, which I definitely do recommend because towards like the end of the game, the enemies hit so freaking hard, and you need those augments for you to stay alive longer. And you even get like the freaking additional life on top of the reconstructor. It's like a little astronaut you can find or craft that gives you the additional life, which comes in super handy a lot of the time. Because there's a lot of close calls that I've had, or if I didn't have the astronaut, I would have probably quit the game. And honestly, this game really does make you feel like you should stop playing because it really does suck when you have to start over. But the experience is just that much fun for me to just keep going. And there's actually another thing you can do besides like the actual main game. If you go back to Helios, which is your ship that you crash landed in, you can actually like do like a special mission here and there. And there's actually a leaderboard for every mission. It gives you a specific gun and you have to survive like a whole like map area in order to complete it. And you get to put on a leaderboard against actual other players. And if you want to test out your abilities as a player, you can do that. I did that. It was actually pretty fun. It's actually like a side thing for you to do. There's actually a ton of like hidden lore here and there for you to go out and collect. There's a bunch of like secret tapes that you can find of Celine because every time you die, Celine always leaves like a little message here and there to warn you on what's gonna come up. And sometimes even your dead body will actually show up around the map and you can actually go up to it and scavenge resources from it, or you can actually avenge them and get back ether. And ether is like your little resource that you use on the reconstructor, which is the extra life, or you can cleanse items so you don't get the malfunction. And sometimes those like little dead bodies of yours actually get infected and you have to fight them and become like another sub boss. And this is just such a lot of stuff for you to do here. even though it is $70. Like honestly, when I heard this game was gonna be $70, I was super hesitant to get it because $70 is a lot to ask for in a game. It is a really high price point, and I remember, and $60 is still really high. So I was super hesitant to get it, but I'm so glad that I was able to even get the chance to play this because I know it's hard to get a PS5. I know it's hard to get an Xbox Series X. It's super hard right now to find one, and I'm just so happy and thankful that I was able to try out this game. And now it's time for me to give the final verdict for Returnal. This was a great start for PS5 in terms of exclusives because honestly, I was kind of worried because we're in the age where games are hit or miss now. It's either it's good or it's bad. And I'm so glad that this game was actually pretty good because I love the concept so much. I love like this roguelike game. I like this mystery, this like little horror kind of thing that it's going for, and it works. It really does work completely, and I really do appreciate the amount of effort that's went into this. And turns out the people that made this made like the Angry Birds games. So when I saw that, I was like, "What? They made this? Really?" I was just super impressed to see what they were able to come up with and how they were able to integrate the new technology that's available to them for them to use. I love the story. I love the ton of weapons that you can find out. I love how you have to make difficult decisions almost every single time because in this game, it's all or nothing. You risk everything to make it easier, or you just play it safe but also make it harder. And that's what this game does best. So, my final verdict for Returnal is an 8 out of 10. This is a great game, and honestly, if you have a PS5, I'd say go out and try this because it is worth your time. I'm on the fence if this is worth $70, but I really did enjoy the experience overall, so it might be worth you actually spending those $70 for you to try this out. Or you can just wait for a sale, which is something I would do if you're on a budget like I am. But go try this out because it is worth your time. If you have any questions, comments, concerns, leave them down in the comments. Or if you're on the podcast version of this, you can message me on Instagram, Cervera.Guillermo. I'll put it in the description. Or you can check me out on Twitch. I'll put that in the description too. I stream occasionally here and there. And if you want like an update on what I'm working next, I usually announce what I'm going to do next on there. So if you want, you could check me out there if you want. And also check out the podcast. I will put a link to it. I've done like a bunch of other reviews and I will transfer them to YouTube. I'm just trying to figure out how to do that because I don't have like a visual portion like I do this one. So I'll figure it out. Or you can just go check them out on the podcast. Did you get the memo? I'll put that in the description. But anyways, thank you guys for listening and I'll see you guys next time on Did You Get the Memo? Bye bye.